Yeah. So thanks for coming out tonight, and we'll ask my wonderful wife, Sue, to open us with prayer.
Father, thank you for Gregory.
Yeah.
For all that he did. And Lord, we do take a lot for granted, and just walking into a place where the AC is working is not always the case. In many places it's not the case. So thank you, Lord, that we have someone who has done that for us. And Lord, thank you for everyone else in this room who gives their time and effort and their energies to do volunteer work anywhere, or not just at the church, at Calvary, various places that people serve and in your name. So we just want to thank you, Jesus, for everyone here. God, we pray that your Holy Spirit would teach us tonight.
Yeah.
That you want us to learn. Obviously, everything you want us to learn, everything in your word. But God, you have a message for each one of us individually today. So we don't want to walk away from here missing what you have for us, the truths that you want to teach us. So help us to be good listeners and be able to take in what you're teaching us tonight through Thom. So thank you. We pray this in Jesus' name.
Amen. Thank you. Thank you. We're in what book? What chapter? Very good. What verse? 8 and 9. Either one. We're going to start and finish 8 up. So if you said 9, you're right. You said 8, you're right. Let's go to 27:8. It says, a person who strays away from home is like a bird that strays from the nest. And as we said, I want to go through these statistics again from last week because they are so stunning. 63% of all suicides come from fatherless homes. 90% of all runaways come from fatherless homes. That's 32% the national 32 times the national average. 85% of children with behavioral issues come from fatherless homes. That's 20 times the national average. 80% of rapists come from fatherless homes. That's 14 times the national average. You know, when you say 14 times, that's stunning. That's stunning. That's 1,400%. 71% of all high school dropouts, fatherless homes. That's 9 times the national average. 70% of all youth in state-operated institutions are fatherless homes, 9 times the national average. 85% of all youth in prison are from fatherless homes. That's 20 times the national average. So we are paying a huge price for fatherless homes. So we shared that statistic last week, and what I said was that sometimes people will say, adults will say, well, you know, it's better that we separate because we fight so much. Now, if it's physical abuse, I thought of this later. Look, if you're a wife and you're being physically abused, you do not stay. If you have a father, a man in the house, and he's abusing the children, you do not stay. You get that? There are churches that will tell you different than that. That is not, listen, that is not right. But if there's arguing, what I mean is, there are couples who say we argue that much, that it can't be good for the children, it's better we split. I want to read an article. It says a startling thought is occurring. This is out of Time magazine, no, U.S. News and World Report. A startling thought is occurring in the folks who study the impact of divorce on children. A good divorce may be much worse than a bad marriage. The conventional wisdom that followed the rapid spread of divorce in the 70s and 80s was that children are resilient and usually overcome the shock of divorce, has been mugged by a brutal gang of facts. Some children cope well and thrive, but taken as a group, the children of divorce are at serious risk. For a decade now, the evidence has piled up. Children of divorce are more depressed, more aggressive toward parents and teachers than are youngsters from intact families. They're much more likely to develop mental and emotional disorders later in life. They start sexual activity earlier, have more children out of wedlock, are less likely to marry, and if they do marry, are more likely then to divorce. They are likelier to abuse drugs, turn to crime, and commit suicide. One study shows that the children of divorce, when they grow up, are significantly less likely than adults from intact families to think they ought to help support their parents in old age. This is an indicator that resentments do not fade and that the divorce boom could create disruption between generations. A report in June from the Heritage Foundation began by reading, quote, American society may have erased the stigma that has once accompanied divorce, but it can no longer affect its massive effects. Now this discussion among researchers and policy experts is becoming a part of national conversation, thanks to Judith Wallerstein's book, The Unsuspected Legacy of Divorce. The unsuspected part is that divorce produces what they call a sleeper effect, deep and long-term emotional problems that arise only when the children enter early adulthood and begin to confront issues of romance and marriage. The powerful ghosts of their parents' experience rise only later in life, Wallerstein told a seminar in New York City last week. Wallerstein is a psychologist who has been studying 131 children of divorce since 1971, interviewing them intensely at different stages of their lives. Now these children are ages 28 through 43, and the news about them is not good. Their parents' divorce, 28 through 43. Their parents' divorce hang over them like a cloud all over their lives. Compared with similar children from intact families in the same neighborhood, the children of divorce were more erratic and more self-defeating. Some sought out unreliable partners or dull ones who at least would never leave them. Others ran from conflict or avoided relationships entirely. Expecting disaster, they often worked to create it. Some grew up to achieve success in work and romance, Wallerstein said, but even they are filled with a sense of dread and foreboding that it could all collapse at any moment, like the intact home they once had. Wallerstein's work undercuts the notion that divorce saves children by eliminating the open conflict of parents. She finds that children generally tune out their parents' bitter quarrels and aren't much bothered by them. They don't much care whether their parents like each other or sleep in different beds. A cordial divorce doesn't help. The children just need parents to stay together. Wallerstein says the loss of the powerful mental image of the intact family inflicts the crucial harm. The damage is compounded by the loss of attention from frazzled parents trying to rebuild their lives. She has her critics. Her sample is small and not necessarily representative, drawn entirely from an upscale neighborhood in Marion County, California. But she has reached deeper into the psyche of children of divorce over a long period of time than any other psychologist, and her fellow researchers seem to be leaning her way. It says part of the shift is the growing realization that divorce is more widespread than it needs to be. In their book, A Generation at Risk, researchers Paul Atmo and Alan Booth report that 70% of American divorces are occurring in low-conflict marriages. In a study of some 2,000 married people, just 30% of divorcing spouses reported more than 2 serious quarrels a month, and only 25% said they disagree often or very often. So 3/4 of divorcing couples say they don't quarrel often or even disagree much. Even bad marriages are likely to improve, according to sociologist Linda Waite, University of Chicago. Analyzing data from National Survey Families and Households, Waite found that 86% of people who said they were in bad marriages but who decided to stick it out said 5 years later their marriage had turned around and they were now happier. 86%. 60% said that their marriages were very happy. Bad marriage is nowhere near as permanent a condition as we sometimes assume. Waite said in her new book, The Case for Marriage, considering what we now know about the impact of divorce on children, that should give many divorce-minded couples some second thoughts. Pretty interesting, isn't it? That the price goes on longer and deeper. And Sue and I have had some experience with a family where only when they were in their late 20s did it all blow up. Is that true? Are my ages right? Late 20s. The whole thing just blew up. They're from out of the area. So again, let's read this one more time and we move on. 27, verse 8. A person who strays away from the home is like a bird that strays from its nest. And the idea is you let those little chicks, what are they called? Little birds, baby birds. That's not very technical, but it's descriptive. Baby birds. You don't want to leave them. Chicks, chickadees. All right, chickadees. All right, gooselings. Who said that? I like that. Hatchlings. That's good. It's probably not accurate, but it sounds more technical. Let's go on. 27:9. The heartfelt counsel of a friend is as sweet as perfume and incense. The heartfelt counsel of a friend is sweet as perfume and incense. New King James says, ointment and perfume delight the heart, and the sweetness of a man's friend gives delight by hearty counsel. So here is some good counsel. Listen to this. It says, forget each kindness that you do as soon as you have done it. Forget the praise that falls to you the moment you have won it. Forget the slander that you hear before you can repeat it. Forget each slight, each spite, each sneer whenever you may meet it. Remember every promise made and keep it to the letter. Remember those who lend you aid and be a grateful debtor. Remember all the happiness that comes your way in living. Forget each worry and distress. Be hopeful and forgiving. Remember good. Remember truth. Remember heaven is above you. And you will find through age and youth that many will love you. It's pretty good, isn't it? Yeah. Let me read the first two. Forget each kindness that you do as soon as you have done it. Forget the praise that falls to you the moment you have won it. Those are good. Here's some funny counsel from Irma Bombeck. If you know Irma Bombeck, listen to this. She says, never have more children than you have car windows. Never loan your car to someone to whom you have given birth. Pick your friends carefully. A friend never goes on a diet when you are fat, or tells you how lucky you are to have a husband who remembers Mother's Day when his gift to you is a smoke alarm. She says, seize the moment. Remember all those women in the Titanic who waved off the dessert cart? Never be in a hurry to end a marriage. Remember, you may need this man or woman someday to finish your sentences. And lastly, there are no guarantees in marriage. If that's what you're looking for, go live with a Sears battery. So there's some good, solid, pithy counsel. So, but it's true. Receive good counsel, give good counsel. It is received as a sweet and pleasant aroma. Be willing to give good counsel. Be willing to receive good counsel. And it is sweet. Isn't that a great picture? Don't you love that? Sweet smell. Okay, 27:10. Yeah, this fits. It says, never abandon a friend, either yours or your father's. Then in your time of need, you won't have to ask your relatives for assistance. It is better to go to a neighbor than to a relative who lives far away. There's some cooperation going on there, isn't there? Cambridge Bible Commentary says this, do not think it necessary to seek out in your time of trouble a blood relative who might live far away from you, and because of the distance, not be particularly empathetic. Instead, you have a friend near at hand who is the true friend of yourself and maybe your father before you. So the idea is that there are times where the friend of a family member, a friend of a relative, is closer, will do more for you than someone from your family, right? You've probably seen that. And as I wrote this, I thought this is the making of a good movie, isn't it? The dear friend of your late father who keeps checking in on you, helping where he can, all because he loved and respected your father so much, now wants to do good to you. Isn't that the making of a good movie? These are rich and rare relationships. Yeah. I remember my grandfather was an amazing man. I never met him. He died 4 years before I was born, but I've heard a lot of stories about him. But I had a number of people tell me that they would have dreams about him. They worked for him. And he was so special to them, they'd have dreams about him. And, I was a grandson, not a son, a grandson, and they treated me special because of him. Do you know what I mean? They showed me more respect than I had. I didn't earn any respect from them because they didn't know me. But they showed me deference because of my grandfather. Those are precious. Those are precious relationships. We find one of these in the Bible. Go back to 2 Samuel, if you don't mind. I'll read it if you'd rather not. But it's 2 Samuel 15, which is in front of this. 2 Samuel 15. And the background here is David is king. His son Absalom tries to take the kingdom away from him. He mounts a very strong army and campaign against David, and David flees the city. And as he's fleeing the city, this little scene takes place. 2 Samuel 15, verse 19. So, let's start at 17. 15, 17. They're leaving. King David his throne is in Jerusalem, and he's now fleeing Jerusalem. Verse 17. The king and his people set out on foot, and they paused at the edge of the city to let David's troops move past to lead the way. There were 600 Gittites who had come with David from Gath, along with the king's bodyguard. Then the king, David, turned to Ittai, the captain of the Gittites, and asked, "Why are you coming with us? Go back with your men to King Absalom, for you are a guest in Israel, a foreigner in exile. You arrived only yesterday, and now should I force you to wander with us? I don't even know where we will go. Go on back and take your troops with you, and may the Lord show you his unfailing love and faithfulness." But Ittai said to the king, "I vow by the Lord and by your own life that I will go wherever you go, no matter what happens, whether it means life or death." David replied, "All right, then come with us." So Ittai and his 600 men and their families went along. Now, what's interesting about this is he was the king from Gath, and Gath was a Philistine city. And yet this man was so loyal to David, and more loyal than his family, more loyal than his son, this Philistine. So those are rare and rich relationships. And this exact situation actually backfired one time in a very big way to David. Again, 2 Samuel 10, just to go 5 chapters forward, 2 Samuel 10, verse 1 to 7. This is when David is firmly in his power. He's seated and he has some thoughts. 2 Samuel 10:1. Sometime after this, King Nahash of the Ammonites died, and his son Hanam, want to put this picture up. And his son Hanam became king. David said, "I'm going to show complete loyalty to Hanam because of his father, Nahash." This may have actually been what Solomon was thinking about when he wrote this, because he would have seen this. "I'm going to show my complete loyalty to Hanam because of his father Nahash, because he was always completely loyal to me." Did you get it? David and Nahash were friends. They're both kings. They're friends. They respect each other. Nahash dies. And David says, "I'm going to show honor to his son because I was such close friends with his father. So David sent ambassadors to express sympathy to Hanun about his father's death. But when David's ambassadors arrived in the land of Ammon, Hanun's advisors said to their master, "Do you really think these men are coming here to honor your father? No, David has sent them to spy out the city so they can come and conquer it." So Hanun seized David's ambassadors and shaved off half of each man's beard and cut off their robes at the buttocks and sent them back to David in shame. When David heard what had happened, he sent messengers to tell the men to stay at Jericho. And again, Ammon is on the west side of the Jordan River. And so Jericho is right at the Jericho River, and they would have come through Jericho on their way up to Jerusalem. So when David heard what had happened, he sent messengers to tell the men to stay at Jericho until their beards grew out, for they were very embarrassed by their appearance. Now the people of Ammon realized how seriously they had angered David, so they hired 20,000 Aramean mercenaries from the land of Bethrob and Zobah, 1,000 from the king of Makkah, and 12,000 from the land of Tob. When David heard about this, he sent Joab and the entire Israel army to fight them. The Ammonite troops drew up their battle lines at the entrance of the gates, and it goes on and it goes on and it goes on, and eventually David won. But how foolish, right? David has this close relationship. The son should have honored that. Instead, the son did not honor that friendship, and it led to war and annihilation. So my guess is that Solomon's words here certainly apply to another huge mistake that his son made, eventually made. Look at 1 Kings. That's a little after 1st and 2nd, well, right after 1st and 2nd Samuel. 1 Kings 12. 1 Kings 12. First Kings 12, starting in verse 2. It says, when Jeroboam, son of Nebat, heard about Solomon's death, he returned from Egypt. He had fled to Egypt to escape from King Solomon. The leaders of Israel sent for Jeroboam, this is Solomon's son, and the whole assembly of Israel went to speak with Rehoboam. He's not king yet, but he wants to be appointed king. Well, I guess he is king technically, but they say, your father was a hard master. We learned something about Solomon here. The people said, your father was a hard master. So although everything you read about Solomon up until this point makes Solomon sound like everybody was just peaches and cream with him, here it says the people, after he died, said, your father was a harsh master. Lighten the harsh labor demands and heavy taxes that your father imposed on us, then we'll be your loyal subjects. That's still the political speech today, isn't it? Lower the taxes, we'll vote for you. Same message. Rehoboam replied, give me 3 days to think this over. Then come back for my answer. So the people went away. Then King Rehoboam, now Solomon died, he appointed Rehoboam. Then King Rehoboam went to discuss this matter with the older men who had counseled his father Solomon. There's also an insight here. We never knew that Solomon had counselors until right here. Isn't it interesting that the wisest man that ever lived or ever would live had counsel, sought counsel? What does that tell you? He was wise. And he knew he was the wisest man that ever lived. Every time he sat down with his counselors and he listened to them, he knew he was wiser than they were. Not because he was stuck up. God told him you'll be wiser than anyone that ever lived or ever would live. So anytime he heard someone say something different than him, he thought, I'm wiser. And he's right, I was. He was. But he still had counselors. That's pretty amazing, isn't it? And do you think they were wise after sitting with Solomon all those years, hearing Solomon's wisdom in their rooms of counsel? Wow. So King Rehoboam went to discuss the matter with the older men who had counseled his father, Solomon. What is your advice, he asked. How should I answer these people? The older counselors replied, if you are willing to serve the people today and give them a favorable answer, they will always be your loyal subjects. But Rehoboam rejected the advice of the elders, and instead asked the opinion of the younger men who had grown up with him and who were now his advisors. So he asked the young bucks, the young friends of his, what is your advice, he asked them. How should I answer these people who want me to lighten the burdens imposed upon them? The young men replied, "This is what you should tell those complainers. My little finger is thicker than my father's waist." Woo! Can you hear this? Can you picture the people, him standing up in his little throne there, screaming this at the people? "If you think he was hard on you, just wait till you see what I'll be like. Yes, my father was harsh on you, but I'll be even harsher. My father used whips on you, but I'll use scorpions." 3 days later, Jeroboam and all the people returned to hear Rehoboam's decision. So Rehoboam heard the old men's counsel, go easy. He heard his young friends say, you tell him, you're going to let him have it. So he's considering that. 3 days later, Jeroboam and all the people returned to hear Rehoboam's decision, as the king had requested. But Rehoboam spoke harshly to them, for he rejected the advice of the older counselors and followed the counsel of his younger advisors. He told the people, "My father was harsh on you, I'll be even harsher. My father used whips on you, I'll use scorpions." So the king paid no attention to the people's demands. This turn of events was the will of the Lord, for it fulfilled the Lord's message to Jeroboam, son of Nebat, through the prophet Ahijah from Shiloh. Here it is, when all Israel realized that the king... I wrote in my Bible here a long pause between verse 15 and 16, produced by shock. I think the people were in shock that he said that. I mean, you can almost picture it, dead silence, like, is he serious? Is he serious? There's this silence because it's so shocking how harsh he is. It says, when all Israel realized that the king had rejected their request, they shouted, "Down with David and his dynasty. We have no share in Jesse's son. Let's go home, Israel. Look out for your own house, O David." So the people of Israel returned home, but Rehoboam continued to rule over the Israelites who lived in the towns of Judah. And that was it. He became king over his tribe, and it was a split kingdom from that point forward. Had been united up until this point. This split the kingdom. So the idea is, stay friends with your parents' friends, which is what it says here, right? Look. Let's go back to that Proverbs again there. 27:10. Never abandon a friend, either yours or your father's. Then in your time of need, you won't have to ask your stupid friends. No. You won't have to ask your relatives for assistance. It's better to go to a neighbor than a relative who lives far away. Stay friends with your parents' friends. You never know what assistance they might be able to give you someday. The loyalty to you is there through your parents. The loyalty to you is there through your parents. So, let me just see. I have one more here. Go to 2 Samuel 9. Then we'll get back at it. 2 Samuel 9. Second Samuel 9. Let me see what this story is. Oh, yeah, I'm not going to read this. This is Mephibosheth. Let me read the beginning. 2 Samuel 9, verse 1. It says, again, David is firmly seated in his throne. He's conquered, he's won, and he's just thinking, what good can I do? What good can I do? So one day David began wondering if anyone in Saul's family was still alive, for he had promised Jonathan that he would show kindness to them. He summoned a man named Ziba, who had been one of Saul's servants. "Are you Ziba?" "Yes, I am, sir." Then the king asked him, "Is anyone still alive from Saul's family? If so, I want to show God's kindness to them in any way I can." If you remember, David and Jonathan made a vow to each other that they would take care of their children. And so now David's in his throne. Jonathan died in battle with Saul. And David is firmly secure in his throne. It's a time of ease. And he just has this thought, I wonder if any of Saul's children, grandchildren, are alive. And so he goes inquiring. And this Mephibosheth, who's a lame boy, is discovered. And Saul and David brings him in his household and treats him as one of, he feeds him at his own table. Really treats him as his own son. It's a beautiful story. You want to read this sometime. Mephibosheth. And it goes on. There's a little intrigue in there. It gets very interesting. But again, David showed loyalty to that grandson, to the son of Jonathan, because of his love for Jonathan. So,
You know, people today, because I know, like in the 70s and the 80s and stuff, family friends would become the godfather, the godmother of the kid.
That's right. A lot of times it works that way, where godfathers, godparents are friends of the parents. That's right. That's a good point. Let's go into 18. Oh, that's Rehoboam taking the advice of his young friends and rejecting the counsel of the old. Proverbs 27:11 says, "My child, how happy I will be if you turn out to be wise. Then I will be able to answer my critics." This is very interesting. Then I will be able to answer my critics if you turn out to be wise. Look at Proverbs 10:1. 10:1. It says, "A wise child brings joy to a father." Proverbs 23:15. 23:15. "My child, how I will rejoice if you become wise." Proverbs 29:3. 29:3. "The man who loves wisdom brings joy to his father." So again, this 27:11 is the same idea. "My child, how happy I will be if you turn out to be wise. Then I will be able to answer my critics." Jameson Fawcett Brown say this, quote, "The wisdom of children both reflect credit on parents and contributes to aid in their difficulties. Be wise, son, and make my heart glad, so that I may answer those who reproach me." In reproach in Hebrew is those who taunt me, those who defy me, those who rail on me. So what Solomon is saying is that by you being a wise child of mine, just by being a wise child, it helps answer my critics. Because the idea is the proof is in the pudding. And you know who I thought of when I thought, now I'm not political, I'm not, and I am not, but this is what I thought of. The Trump family. You know, President Trump, he's our president. I'm getting a lot of different faces here as I look out here. He's our president, so we respect him, right? You got that. But whenever people would start saying what a rotten, terrible, lousy man he is, they would say, but what about his family? He has such good kids. You know, they're all with him. They're loyal to him. You know, how? And look, I'm not making any commentary, and I'm not. Please don't read it. I'm not. All I'm saying is it fits this verse perfectly. It says, because then I will be able to answer my critics. It says, be wise, my son, and make my heart glad, so that I may answer those who reproach me. Look at my children. Look at my children. You say I'm such a rotten man. How do you explain that my children turned out? Just pure luck. Forget Trump. Let me get off him. Let me go back to this. Somebody says that. Somebody says that. You're a rotten man. You have never done anything good in your whole life. Did you meet my children? No, I didn't. Meet my children. I don't want to meet your children. Just meet my children. You know, the same is true of your wife, if you're a man. You have to say that today, unfortunately. Listen to this. I'll skip over that one fast. It says, we quote this in the marriage seminar. It says, when you look into the face of a man's wife, you will see just what he is as a man. Whatever he has invested or withheld from her is reflected in her countenance. True? Listen again. When you look into the face of a man's wife, you will see just what he is as a man. Whatever he has invested in or withheld from her is reflected in her countenance. And the same applies to children here. Did you get it? And that's the concept behind this verse. When someone says, listen to it, listen. Be wise, my son, and make my heart glad, so I may answer those who taunt me, blaspheme me, rail on me. Your being a wise son is my answer to those who say your life is worthless. You have no value. You've lived your life horribly. Let me be able to point to you, my son. Let me be able to point to you. And I like that picture. There you go, huh? That's pretty cool. Let's go on. 27:12. Did you see that picture? Can you see what's going on there? Yeah, it's a picnic table with a box on top of that, and then a piece of plywood on top of that, 2 cinder blocks, and then a step ladder up against that. And the guy's hanging near power wires, power lines.
And the cinder blocks aren't even level.
And the cinder blocks aren't level. Yeah, yeah. So if you ever Google like bad ladder placement, you're going to laugh your head silly, because there are some bad ladder placements, and I've done some of them, haven't I, Sue? Yes, I have. Yes, I have. If you can get up there, if there's a way you get up there, you get up there.
And then you don't have any help.
No, he doesn't have any help. He's going to need help shortly. Yeah. Depending where that cinder block is on his downfall, he's going to need some help. Well, here's 27:12. A prudent person foresees the danger ahead and takes precautions. The simpleton goes blindly on and suffers the consequences. New International Version says the prudent see danger and take refuge, but the simple keep going and pay the penalty. A prudent person foresees danger, ESV. The prudent sees danger and hides himself, but the simple go on and suffer for it. A prudent man sees danger. There's a man I talked to just recently who, at the age of 11, his first crime he committed, this is a true story, first crime he committed was he stole a car, but it ended up being the judge's mother's car. Talk about bad luck. Yeah, so I mean, I think he probably would have wished he was a little more prudent that day. You know, the idea here is, be wary as a serpent, harmless as a dove. We should be prudent, we should be careful, but be harmless. A prudent person foresees danger ahead and takes precautions. The simple goes blindly on and suffers the consequences. Let me go on. The next one, verse 13. It says, be sure to get collateral from anyone who guarantees the debt of a stranger. Get a deposit if someone guarantees the debt of an adulterous woman. Now, the first part, it says, be sure to get collateral from anyone who guarantees the debt of a stranger. Why? Because the debtor will almost, in all probability, default. Atlantic Magazine did an article on this, and they said 75% of all loans who are co-signed end up being paid off by the co-signer. 75%. So that's why it says, be sure you get collateral from anyone who guarantees the debt of the stranger. In other words, forget the guy who made the loan with you. He ain't going to pay. You better make sure you have collateral from the second guy, because that's where it's going to come down to. You need collateral. He needs a backer, and you need to get collateral from the backer, because the first guy's gone. Don't even expect it. Now, the second part of this is very interesting. New Living says, get a deposit if someone guarantees the debt of an adulterous woman. NAS says, take his garment when he becomes surety for a stranger, and listen to this, and for an adulterous woman, hold him in pledge. King James says, take his garment that is surety for a stranger, and take a pledge of him for a strange woman. And I believe the idea here is that the judgment upon a man who spends time with a prostitute, the judgment that happens to a man who spends time with a prostitute is so certain, the financial judgment that will fall on a man who seeks out a prostitute is so certain that the only way you're safe to collateralize a loan you make to this man is to take him as collateral. Take him as collateral. This was in a day where you indentured people into servitude because they owed money, right? And so he's saying there is no collateral for a man that goes with prostitutes, your only chance of getting that back is by indenturing him. You need to take him as collateral. And why is this judgment so certain? Look at Proverbs 7. It's a fascinating proverb. For an adulterous woman, hold him in pledge. Proverbs 7:24. 7:24. The adulterous woman, Proverbs 7:24. Listen to me, my son, and pay attention to my words. Don't let your heart stray away toward her. Don't wander down her wayward path. And again, folks, this isn't just sex for money. This is a broader phrase, a broader use of the word. For she has been the ruin of many. Numerous men have been her victims. Her house is on the road to the grave. Her bedroom is a den of death. Then look at Proverbs 5. It makes this point exactly. Proverbs 5, verse 3. Verse 3, it says, the lips of an immoral woman, this isn't a prostitute, the lips of an immoral woman are as sweet as honey, and her mouth is smoother than oil. But the result is as bitter as poison, sharp as a double-edged sword. Her feet go down to death, her steps lead straight to the grave, to Sheol, to hell. For she does not care about the path to life. She staggers down a crooked trail and doesn't even realize where it leads. So now, my son, listen to me. Solomon with 1,000 wives, listen to me. Never stray from what I'm about to say. Run from her. Don't go near the door of her house. Listen, if you do, you will lose your honor and hand over to merciless people everything you have achieved in life. And here it is, why Solomon said, if it's a man in an adulterous relationship, you take him as collateral because he'll have nothing left. And here Solomon says the point. Verse 10, strangers will obtain your wealth, and someone else will enjoy the fruit of your labor. And that's true. And I've seen this, folks. I've seen guys get involved in adulterous relationships that have lost everything. Everything. There's a financial judgment that follows. And so that's why Solomon's wisdom in chapter 27 is so spot on. You can't collateralize a man who's committing adultery because he won't have anything left that you've collateralized. All that's left is him. That's all there's going to be left. And that won't be much left to him because in verse 11, chapter 5, it says, afterward you will groan in anguish when disease consumes your body. So even him that you're taking is diseased. So keep that in mind. You know, this collateralizing alone reminded me of Genesis 38. Some of you know this story. This is a story of Judah and Tamar. On collateralizing a prostitute, it's an interesting connection. And Solomon would have been very aware of this story. And I will tell you why in a moment. Genesis 38. There's some wild stories in the Bible, and this is one of them. Genesis 38. I wrestled with taking the time to do this, but I thought, you know, because of Solomon knowing this story so well and how he said this, you know, for an adulterous woman, hold him in pledge and take a pledge of him for a strange woman. There's just a tie in here. So listen to this. Genesis 38:1. It says, about that time Judah, and this is one of the 12 sons of Jacob, at this time Judah left home and moved to Adullam, where he visited a man named Hira. Don't ever visit a man named Hira. You learn that from this story. Stay away from Hiras, all Hiras. There he met a Canaanite woman, the daughter of Shua, and he married her. She became pregnant and had a son, and Judah named the boy Then Judah's wife had another son, and she named him Onan. And when she had a third son, she named him Shelah. At the time of Shelah's birth, they were living at Kezeb. When his oldest son grew up, Judah arranged a marriage to a young woman named Tamar. But was a wicked man in the Lord's sight, so the Lord took his life. If you ever want to ask, did God ever kill anyone? Right here are two examples. He did. The Lord took his life. Then Judah said to Er's brother Onan, Judah, the father-in-law, said, you must marry Onan. You must marry Tamar as our law requires of the brother of a man who has died. Her first son will be your brother's heir. But Onan was not willing to have a child who would not be his heir. So whenever he had intercourse with Tamar, he spilled the semen on the ground to keep her from having a baby who would belong to his brother. But the Lord considered it a wicked thing for Onan to deny a child to his dead brother, so the Lord took Onan's life too. Then Judah told Tamar, his daughter-in-law, not to marry again at that time, but to return to her parents' home. She was to remain a widow until his youngest son, Shelah, was old enough to marry her. But Judah didn't really intend to do this because he was afraid Shelah would also die, like his two brothers. So Tamar went home to her parents. In the course of time, Judah's wife died. After a time of mourning was over, Judah and his friend Hira the Adullamite, here he is again, went to Timnah to supervise the shearing of his sheep. Someone told Tamar that his father-in-law had left the sheep for sheep shearing at Timnah. Tamar was now aware, this is Judah's daughter-in-law. Tamar was now aware that Shelah had grown up, but had not called her to come and marry him. So she changed out of her widow's clothing and covered herself with a veil to disguise herself. And this is the picture. She covered herself with a veil to disguise herself. Then she sat beside the road at the entrance to the village of Enom, which is on the way to Timnah. Judah noticed her as he went by and thought she was a prostitute, since her face was veiled. So he stopped and propositioned her to sleep with him, not realizing that she was his own daughter-in-law. How much will you pay me? Tamar asked. I'll send you a young goat from my flock, Judah promised. What pledge? Here's the pledge. What pledge will you give me so I can be sure you will send it? Well, what do you want? He inquired. She replied, I want your identification seal, your cord, and your walking stick. So Judah gave these items to her. She then let him sleep with her, and she became pregnant. So she had sex with her father-in-law. Afterwards, she went home, took off her veil, put on her widow's clothing as usual. Judah asked his friend Hira the Adullamite to take the young goat back to her and pick up the pledges he had given. But Hira couldn't find her. So he asked the men who lived there, where can I find the prostitute who was sitting beside the road at the entrance to the village? We've never had a prostitute here, they replied. So Hira returned to Judah and told him he couldn't find her anywhere, and that the men of the village had claimed they didn't have a prostitute. Then let her keep the pledges, Judah exclaimed. We tried our best to send her the goat. We'd be the laughing stock of the village if we went back again. About 3 months later, word reached Judah that Tamar, his daughter-in-law, was pregnant as a result of prostitution. Now, if you ever say that prostitution is always for money, she could have got pregnant anyway. Not necessarily by money. So anyway, she's pregnant. Bring her out and burn her, Judah said. How do you like that? There's a compassionate man. Bring her out and burn her. But as they were taking her out to kill her, she sent this message to her father-in-law. The man who owns this identification seal and walking stick is the father of the child. Do you recognize him? Whoa. Judah admitted that they were his, and he said, she is more right than I am, because I didn't keep my promise to let her marry my son Shelah. But Judah never slept with Tamar again. I bet he didn't. In due season, the time of Tamar's delivery arrived, and she had twin sons. As they were born, one of them reached out his hand, and the midwife tied a scarlet thread around the wrist of the child who appeared first, saying, this one came out first. But then he drew back his hand, and the other baby was actually first to be born. What? The midwife exclaimed. How did you break out first? Ever since then, he was called Perez. Then the baby with a scarlet thread on his wrist was born, and he was named Zerah. Zerah. Now, what's interesting, Solomon wrote this about the pledge of a prostitute. Look at Matthew chapter 1. Matthew chapter 1. Matthew chapter 1, verse 1 and 2. Matthew 1, 1 and 2. This is a record of the ancestors of Jesus the Messiah, a descendant of King David. This is a record of the ancestors of Jesus. Verse 2, Abraham was the father of Isaac. Isaac was the father of Jacob. Jacob was the father of Judah and his brother. This is that Judah. Go down to verse 16. Verse 16 says, following the line down, it says Jacob was the father of Joseph, the husband of Mary. Mary was the mother of Jesus, who's called the Messiah. So it goes from Abraham to Jacob to Judah, the Judah we just read about, all the way to Jesus. But look back in verse 16. I'm sorry, look back in verse 3, verse 3. Judah was the father of Perez and Zerah. Their mother was Tamar. Perez was the father of Hezron. Did you get what's going on here? This child born of incest was in the lineage of Jesus. And go down to verse 5. Solomon was the father of Boaz. His mother was Rahab, also a harlot, by the way. Boaz was the father of Obed. Obed was the father of Jesse. Jesse was the father of David. David was the father of Solomon. The Solomon who wrote this. The Solomon whose great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandmother was Tamar, of whom a pledge was given, an adulterous relationship, a pledge was given that was in his mind. So although it's not a direct connection, I wrote here, was this in Solomon's mind, this pledge for an adulteress when he wrote this? There's probably a good chance. There's probably a good chance. So, let me read that one more time. The idea is that the judgment upon a man who spends time with a prostitute is so certain, the financial judgment is so certain, that Solomon says the only way you are safe to collateralize a loan that you make to that man is to take him as collateral. It's your only chance. So, let's go on. 27:14. Proverbs 27:14 says, if you shout a pleasant greeting to your neighbor too early in the morning, it will be counted as a curse. Is that true? See, it depends if you get up early or you get up late. If you get up early, this doesn't make a whole lot of sense to you. If you get up late, this makes a lot of sense to you. Your neighbor's mowing your lawn at 6 in the morning. You know, let me read this. But there's another side of this. Listen to the commentator, Gill. He goes deeper. He says, so as not only to be heard by him, but by others. This man is extravagant in his praises and commendations of his neighbor, comments which exceed all bounds of modesty, truth, and decency, who affects pompous words, and shows himself to be a real flatterer, having some sinister end to serve by it. Do you get it? Gill is saying this man is doing more than just shouting a greeting. He's flattering this neighbor with pompous words, extreme flattery. He says, rising early in the morning to do this in case any other man should flatter his neighbor before he does and get the benefit of seeking the flattery. Or maybe as though this man does not have enough time in the day to finish all of his other flatterings, that he has to start early to get it done by the end of the day. It says, it shall be counted a curse to him, either to the man doing the flattery or the man who receives the flattery, and by all wise men who hear it, who despise the one doing the flattery just the same as if he cursed his friend. Now, the simple version, the more benign translation is, how you like that? Don't shout an enthusiastic greeting into your neighbor's window at 5 a.m. Isn't it a beautiful day? It'll be counted as a curse, it says here. Now, I am really curious to ask this because I have wondered this for the last 3 years, and you will be my answer. You really will. It is wrong to call someone at 5 o'clock in the morning. Is that right? Is it wrong to text someone at 5 o'clock in the morning? Is it? Because it has the same effect? Does it ring like the same thing? See, mine doesn't. Mine doesn't. Yours doesn't. How many people here does it ring when you get a text? It rings. So, no, another question. If you get a text at 5 o'clock in the morning, no, let me start over. If you get a phone call at 5 o'clock in the morning, will it wake you up? Yes, no. Yes.
I'm usually still awake.
Okay. So, how many of you, if you get a text at 5 o'clock in the morning, will it wake you up? Wow. Okay, then I'm not going to text. See, mine doesn't ring. And I just assume nobody else's rings. But I've been cautious not to do it, but I'm thinking maybe I can get away with it, but no, I can't. Because it'll be counted as a curse. Right? Yeah.
It also depends on what the message is.
It depends on what the message is. What's that? Yeah, well, no, I'm just not going to do it. You know, my rule kind of as a pastor is I don't call after 9 p.m. and I don't call before 9 a.m. unless I know the person. Or if I'm really mad at them. No. I do 9 a.m., 9 p.m. That's where unless I know someone. I know someone's up early, I'll call them early. But I'm glad about the text thing. You've helped me there. Yes, Joe.
There was a campaign for president of the United States. I think it was for president of the United States. And one of the two parties conspired to call all these people that were for that person for president at 6 or 5 or 4 or 3 or 2 in the morning. They didn't vote for it.
Wow.
Yeah, that was a plan. We're going to get them so upset that we'll call them on the hour, every hour, from 2 o'clock to 6 or 7 in the morning, and they won't vote for that guy. And it worked.
And it worked. Wow. Isn't that? Did you hear that? That a campaign, maybe for president, they strategized to call people that were in favor of their opponent at 3 o'clock in the morning, and again at 4 o'clock, and again at 5 o'clock, and again at 6 o'clock, to make them so upset they wouldn't vote for their candidate, and it worked. They didn't vote for him. So they counted it as a curse. That's a perfect.
Who did that, Trump?
Oh, boy. Okay, hey, let's go into 27:15. Is it 14? Yeah, 14. If you shout a pleasant to your neighbor too early in the morning, he will count it as a curse. 15. A nagging wife is as annoying as a constant dripping on a rainy day.
So true.
Trying to stop her complaints is like trying to stop the wind or hold on to something with greasy hands. Greased hands. Now, you know, we don't have time to finish this, so you want to come back next week. But here's let me just give you a thought on this. Here's an observation. As I thought about why would this, because men complain too, right? Is there a single woman in here that knows that a man complains? Honey, I know you don't, but is there anyone? Men complain. But listen, I thought about it. Why would this apply more to women? And I think it does, but I think for a valid reason. Listen. Here's an observation. When a husband is dissatisfied with something about his wife, he has more options available to him as how he's going to deal with it. For instance, he can choose to withdraw emotionally. He can just pull away. That's not a satisfactory option to a wife because she wants to be in a relationship. A man can get by in a marriage not in the relationship. A man can be satisfied to be in a marriage unattached emotionally. A woman cannot. So that option is available to him. It's not open to a woman. In our culture, in this culture of Solomon's, the woman stayed at home with many children. So if the husband got mad at his wife, he could just stay away from home. And she was stuck at home with the children. See, a man had that option to him. She did not. Or fighting. Still true today. If a man has more options to be physically abusive. Now, there are a lot of men injured by women too. But all things being equal, it's to the man's advantage. That's an option that's not as open to her. I'm not condoning it. It's a wrong thing. I'm just saying when you're looking at all the ways a man can respond that a woman cannot, The second thing is not talking as punishment. A man can just stop talking. And that is painful to a woman. The average woman speaks 20,000 words a day. Man speaks 7,000. The average woman, 20,000 words. The average man, 7. And we can make a lot of jokes about that. We're not. So he can just stop talking. So you see, what it does is it puts a woman in a place where she can get frustrated. Because the man has options to deal with a bad marriage. Like I said, the woman, she just doesn't have as many options. And so she holds it and she holds it in, and then bang, out it comes. Amen. And all this stuff comes out. So although both men and women complain, the woman is more prone to be caught in the trap of that being her only option, just out of sheer frustration in reverting to words. She probably tried nice ones in the beginning, stern words in the middle, but now they're nagging and complaining at the end. And so she gets this put on her. But the truth is, it's, I'm not saying there's just cause, but it's understandable. It's understandable why she would get this rap more than a man, because a man has more options to him. We complain. I don't think I ever have to Sue, but we can complain. I've heard it. No, of course I have. Of course I have. Hey, we're out of time. We'll look at this a little more next week. Let's close in prayer. Father, thanks for the truth of your word. Thank you, Father, for allowing us to benefit from the wisdom of Solomon. And we're benefiting from the wisdom of Solomon in Ecclesiastes, but from a different vantage point. But here we get the pure, unadulterated wisdom of Solomon. And I pray, Lord, we'd learn from this. Those who fail to learn from history are destined to repeat it. And Lord, we will repeat the mistakes that the thousands, the hundreds of generations that before us have made mistakes because they did not listen. Lord, help us to learn from what we study. Lord, bless each one here this week ahead. We pray in Christ's name. And all of God's people said, Amen. Thanks for coming. Hey, and Sunday, by the way, we're going to be talking about why did Solomon appoint a fool to replace him? He appointed Rehoboam as his replacement. He was a fool. How in the world could Solomon have made that mistake? That's Sunday. God bless you all.